Okay, so we're going to talk about one of the songs of experience from William Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience, and the poem that we're looking at is London. Now, ostensibly, this is a very straightforward, simple poem, four-line stanzas or four quatrains, which mirror the passage of a casual observer, maybe the poet himself or a persona created by the poet as he walks through the streets of London, and he observes or marks, to use his own words, the things that he sees. It's probably worth establishing a little bit of context. We've come a long way since the beginning of the Songs of Experience. The hope and the potential and the spirituality of the early Songs of Innocence have been lost, and the tone and the ambience of London is very heavy and dark and sinister, and there's a brutal repetition and weight to this particular poem, as Blake makes very clear to us what he thinks of the city. Now, of course, when he wrote the poem in 1792, England was a country which was changing rapidly, as was Europe around it. In 1789, the French Revolution had taken place, and the philosophy of equality and liberty and brotherhood was spreading rapidly across the rest of Europe. And Blake himself, in many ways, was seen as a radical thinker. But in his own home city of London, he sees that the people are not revolutionary in spirit, but in fact they're suffering, and they're weighed down and lost, manacled, to use his own word, by their poverty and their hopelessness to which they contribute. And there's a darkness and horror about the city as he describes it, and all of the images that he evokes are ones which give us no sense that anything good can come from living in the city. All of Blake's favourite contrasts are being used here to contribute to this overall feeling of a city in decline, which goes, of course, completely against the idea of the empire builders, for whom London was the heart of a great empire, the heart of civilization, a cultural, political and economic centre, which was a mirror for all people who wanted to see how progress could be made. But for Blake, none of that rang true. Although he was unusual in this respect, one of his contemporaries, another romantic poet, William Wordsworth, writing at the same time, composed a very famous sonnet called Lines Composed upon Westminster Bridge, in which he eulogised and praised the beauty of the city in the early morning. And for him it seemed a place which was all of those things, civilised and cultivated, and an indication of what progress could achieve. But for Blake it's not. We have the echoes of that early introduction to the Songs of Innocence, of a lonely poet wandering and looking around and marking, recording what he sees. But instead of seeing children, the image of like an angelic child upon a cloud asking him to record, to write, to sing, now we don't even see people anymore. We just hear echoes of where they've been. We see the stains, the marks, the signs, or the cries of where they once were. It's almost like the city in its darkness has sucked out the soul of the people. And so the tone is very dark and very bleak. And so as he walks through, he, like Blake himself would have done, he records what he sees. Blake would have written down his observations as he walked through the streets of London, and he probably would have sketched them as well. Of course, he was a very keen artist and a very talented and well-known engraver as well. So each of the stanzas builds upon the feeling established by the previous one. There's a great deal of repetition, although the style, like so many of his poems, is very simple and very regular. There's a very easy pattern to the rhyme and to the rhythm, and this A-B pattern is established, and yet at the same time the constant and brutal repetition of images and diction almost drives into our mind, like hammering in nails, exactly what it is that he wants us to remember. And what he wants us to remember is not pretty. Okay, so looking at the first stanza, he begins by saying, "I wander through each chartered street near where the chartered Thames does flow." The repetition of the word chartered is very important here, because it gives the impression of something which has been bought and paid for. A charter was like an official certificate which was actually given to a company or to a business after they purchased the right to work to sell a particular product. But when you apply it to a city or even to a river, a natural thing, it doesn't seem to belong there. And for Blake, it's almost like his city, his town has been bought and sold, and even the river which extends to the rest of which takes London out to the empire, to the rest of the world, itself has been bought and paid for, and is owned. It doesn't belong to everybody. It's something which money can buy. And as a result of that, he says, I mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. The deliberate biblical, archaic word like woe, superlative, great sadness, and the triple repetition of the word mark. Mark and observation, but also, of course, a mark can be something which is indelibly etched or sketched into people's faces. And marks of weakness. We knew the social problems that faced people in Blake's London. If you ever see the art of his contemporary William Hogarth, paintings such as Gin Lane, you'll see exactly what he means by marks of weakness, the ravages of disease, of drug abuse, of alcoholism, particularly a blight upon the city, of people who simply can't look after themselves, who had terrible quality of life, terrible diet, and lived in awful conditions. And as he moves on, walking further, the people have gone, but he hears the cries, in every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every ban. The repetition of the word every, almost like 6 times. The repetition, the use of anaphora at the beginning of 3 consecutive lines, like boom, boom, boom. You hear it, it's remorseless, it doesn't go away, it's like a drumbeat of shame and anger that the poet is expressing. We hear the cries of men, children who are frightened, very evocative and an emotional sound to anybody who's a parent, or indeed to anybody. The notion that children could be left crying and untended and unwanted in every voice, not just a few, but all the time. Everywhere he goes, in every ban, in everything which is forbidden, or every sign that he sees, mind-forged manacles, this kind of alliterative reminder that we chain ourselves. It's not just the physical chains. And of course Londoners would be very familiar with physical chains, because the image of prisoners in the jails, going into Newgate and places like that, but also the convicts going onto the ships bound for Australia, and indeed for many English people the observation of slaves about to embark upon the Middle Passage. They'd be very familiar with what manacles and chains actually were. But these, in fact, in Blake's words, are mind-forged manacles. They're metaphorical chains in which ordinary urban poor restrict and limit their own potential by the fact that they don't put themselves in touch with the things that Blake saw as so vital and so natural to human development and the development of a society. Their inner spirituality, their childishness, their innocence, to remain in touch with nature. The essence of the city seems to have taken all that away from them. And in that respect, London is a very dark and in fact hellish place. It's like an anti-heaven. It's a place where there is no salvation and no hope.